Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a meeting of the Subcommittee on Military Personnel of the House Armed Services Committee. The hearing will come to order. Today, the subcommittee will hear from several non-governmental witnesses on their view of the Department of Defense's and Services enactment and enforcement of religious accommodation, statutory and regulatory guidance, and its impact on the rights of religious expression of our service members. Historically, the armed forces have supported religious freedom and accommodated service members' religious beliefs and practice when possible. I believe we can maintain a proper balance between religious accommodations and military readiness, unit cohesion, and good order and discipline. One of the strengths of our military is its diversity of belief and mutual respect. As such, it's been important for Congress to ensure that the appropriate statutory and regulatory guidance is in place and that DoD and the military services are implementing such guidance in order for the services to meet important spiritual and religious needs of the troops. Recognizing that there have been challenges to accommodating religious practices and beliefs, we have engaged in various efforts to clarify the role of religion in the military, prevent religious discrimination, and provide appropriate religious accommodations for those service members who seek it. Our goal today is to better understand the perception from outside of the Department of Defense on its implementation of the religious accommodations policy and the effect on service members. Before I introduce our panel, let me offer our ranking member, Congresswoman Susan Davis from California, an opportunity to make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me also welcome our witnesses here today. Our hearing on religious accommodation in the armed services provides us an opportunity to hear from non-governmental witnesses, some of whom have military backgrounds, on their views of the Department of Defense's implementation and enforcement of laws and policies on religious accommodation. The balance of the accommodation of religious beliefs of service members and chaplains with the need for commanders to establish and maintain good order, discipline, and readiness has been a topic of concern for this committee over the past several years. Military chaplains face the unique challenge of providing spiritual care for all those who serve in the military, regardless of their particular faith or beliefs. And this often requires military chaplains to provide counsel or spiritual support to those of a different faith from themselves. This challenge has often created the perception that the department is prohibiting chaplains and service members from practicing the tenets of their faith. Often in these discussions, what is lost is the recognition that a military chaplain's responsibility is not just to his or her faith and those that follow that specific faith, but it is instead to provide non-denominational and inclusive spiritual support to all those in uniform and their families, regardless of their specific religious belief. Our nation, as we all know, is home to individuals who practice every religion the world over, including those who have no belief or religion at all. Our diversity is what makes our country stronger, and our ability to respect different cultures and beliefs, including religious beliefs, is the bedrock of American values. And our armed forces is a reflection of our country, and we need to ensure that these values are upheld and protected for all service members and military clergy alike. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, and again, welcome to all of you, and thank you for your presence here.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I'd like to welcome our distinguished witnesses. Mr. Michael Berry, Senior Counsel, Director of Military Affairs of the Liberty Institute, Dr. Ron Cruz, Chaplain, Colonel, U.S. Army Retired, Executive Director of the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty, Rabbi Bruce H. Kahn, D.D., Captain, U.S. Navy Retired, Mr. Travis Weber, Director, Center for Religious Liberty of the Family Research Council, Mr. Michael Weinstein, President, Military Religious Freedom Foundation, I now ask unanimous consent that Congressman Dr. John Fleming from Louisiana, Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler of Missouri, Congressman Randy Forbes of Virginia, Congressman Tim Huelskamp of Kansas, and Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia be allowed to participate and ask questions after all members from the subcommittee have had an opportunity to question the witnesses. Without objection, so ordered. In addition, I ask unanimous consent to enter the following statements into the record from the Forum on the Military Chaplaincy, from the Military Association of Atheists and Free Thinkers, from the American Humanist Association, from the Associated Gospel Churches, from the Sikh Coalition, from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, from the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, from the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and from the American Civil Liberties Union. Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Berry, we'll begin with your opening statement. We will then have statements from Dr. Cruz, Rabbi Kahn, Mr. Weber, and Mr. Weinstein. As a reminder, please keep your statements to 3 minutes or less. We have your written testimony for the record. Following your testimony, each member will participate with questions in rounds of 5 minutes each until adjournment. And additionally, you need to be aware that votes could be called virtually any time. And when the votes are called, if there's any opportunity to break, we'll recess and then come back. And but it's always quite up in the air. Mr. Berry. And press the.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and committee members, good morning, and on behalf of Liberty Institute, thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important issue. Liberty Institute is a national religious liberties law firm whose mission is to defend and restore religious liberty in accordance with the principles of America's founders. As Liberty Institute's Senior Counsel and Director of Military Affairs, I have the privilege of working on religious liberties issues affecting our armed forces. Our military's most formidable weapon is not a high-tech vehicle or a new aircraft carrier. It is the American service member and his or her selfless service and sacrifice to this nation. Often, it is that service member's faith that enables him or her to endure the rigors of military life and indeed the horrors of combat. We must therefore ensure that those who sacrifice so much for our religious freedom do not lose theirs. Recent events, however, demonstrate an alarming increase in incidents of religious hostility within our military, both in frequency and severity. Within the past year alone, Liberty Institute represented or advised multiple service members who experienced religious hostility by military superiors. The following examples serve as a sample of such cases. A 19-year Air Force veteran was relieved of his duties and transferred to a different unit because his religious beliefs conflicted with those of his commander. A 24-year Army veteran and commanding officer was threatened with career-ending punishment because he expressed his religious beliefs in response to an Army policy directive that he believed treated soldiers unfairly. Soldiers at separate bases were instructed that certain religious ministries, including evangelical Christians and Tea Party supporters, were to be considered domestic hate groups and or terror threats. In each of these incidents, Liberty Institute took action to defend the religious freedom of our service members. Nevertheless, each of our clients and their families experienced fear, intimidation, and a sense of betrayal by their service. On a broader scale, the result was a chilling effect on religious freedom and expression that harms our entire military. Despite this committee's laudable efforts to protect religious freedom in the military, there is still much work to be done. I'm confident that our military commanders genuinely seek to do what is right and what is lawful. The problem, however, is that we now have a military culture of fear and confusion when it comes to the law. To combat this, we respectfully recommend directing our military to dedicate resources towards training and educating our current and future leaders on our most sacred rights as Americans. That would be a significant first step towards reversing the disturbing trend we have observed and strengthening our military. I conclude by quoting an excerpt from a report delivered to President Truman as the United States emerged from World War II and faced a new kind of enemy. If we expect our armed forces to be physically prepared, we must also expect them to be ideologically prepared. I thank the committee for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berry. And we now proceed to Dr. Cruz, and I want to thank Dave Giacchetti, on our staff of the Military Personnel Subcommittee. He is above reproach on keeping time. And Mr. Berry, you were remarkable. This is unheard of. But no, so that everybody has an opportunity, and Mr. Giacchetti will be the arbiter. Thank you, Dr. Cruz.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and committee members. The Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty exists to protect the religious liberty of chaplains and those they serve. We speak on behalf of almost 50% of chaplains currently serving in the military. Further, all of our members are military veterans, and we bring that wealth of experience to bear in this public comment. The military is a unique institution of the state that may make uniquely comprehensive demands of individual service members that it cannot make of any other free member of society. Our nation has a history, though, of working hard to protect and accommodate military religious liberty, a tradition that has limited restrictions on service members' ability to live their faiths. Certainly, no American, especially those serving in the armed forces, should be forced to abandon their religious beliefs. Accordingly, the military chaplaincy was established before the founding of our nation to ensure the free exercise of faith for all service members and their families. Thus, in keeping with the best of our national traditions, our military has long been a place where citizens could, as the Army Chaplain Corps motto states, serve pro Deo et Patria, for God and country. But over the past few years, our government has been retreating from that history of accommodation, enacting new policies without considering their dangerous effect on religious liberty, and sometimes taking overtly hostile actions toward faith. We have reported to you many concerns, including an Ohio National Guard removing an article from a wing newsletter that mentioned the words faith and Jesus Christ, while Moody Air Force officials allowed an article about atheism to remain. We believe the atheist airman has the liberty to write about the merits of atheism, and we believe the Christian airman has the liberty to write about the value of his faith in Jesus Christ. This double standard must stop. An Air Force Academy cadet was required to remove a Bible verse from his personal whiteboard outside his living quarters. An equal opportunity officer gave a PowerPoint training presentation that listed evangelical Christians, Catholics, Orthodox Jews as religious extremists. Although the military may, when necessary to its mission, diminish some aspects of religious liberty, it may not and must not extinguish it. These attacks on religious liberty may be abated somewhat by the passage of Section 533 of the NDAA, but as long as military officials are labeling Orthodox religious believers as domestic hate groups, the military will be abandoning its duty to protect religious liberty for service members. General Patton once said, "It is the spirit of the men who follow and lead that gain the victory. To attack the religious beliefs of our service personnel is to attack their spirits, the very spirits who are ensuring the safety of our nation." Thank you for your work on this issue, and we stand ready to help you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cruz. Rabbi Kahn.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to offer this testimony. It's an honor to participate. I was commissioned an ensign in 1970, retired as a Navy captain in June 2002, was called back and served for a short time in the Iraqi theater in 2003. I've served in a wide array of commands afloat and ashore with the Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. Navy Chief of Chaplains Rear Admiral Margaret Kibben wrote, "Chaplains are a safe place, a sanctuary where our people can come to regain a sense of wholeness and hope." I think everyone can agree with that conviction, but what does it take to be that sanctuary, providing a path to wholeness and hope? We take a step when we serve everyone. Over the decades, at least 95% of the troops to whom I provided ministry were not Jewish. They were from numerous faiths and included those with no interest in religion at all. That amazing diversity is just one reason why the military chaplaincy is necessarily a far different ministry from that in the civilian denominational setting. For example, as a Jewish chaplain, I don't pray in Hebrew or Aramaic when doing so defeats the point of my presence. I don't counsel by citing the Talmud when I know the people with me have no awareness of or affection for that source. I would not avoid passages in the Quran when conducting a Bible class that Muslims would like to attend. When someone, perhaps a constituent of yours, who may be 20 years old or so, needs me to pray with him or her before heading into a firefight, or needs me to say the right words when, God forbid, he or she is dying from one's wounds, I will do so as your constituent in crisis requires. And I will do so every time I'm a U.S. Navy chaplain. We must always put first the spiritual and moral well-being of the troops. Their religious freedom is not to be sacrificed at the altar of our own. No one forced us to become chaplains. This is the ministry we volunteered for, and we must accept the expectations of flexibility that come with it. That is why, depending on the religious composition of the troops present, we adjust what we say and do to embrace as many of them as possible rather than set them apart one from the other. Let's remember that when troops go into battle, they must have each other's backs. The enemy tries to divide and conquer. In service with one another, we unite and win. When we follow Chaplain Kibben's advice, we enhance unit cohesion, readiness, and mission accomplishment in service to God and country. I believe that. I am a U.S. Navy chaplain. Thank you for providing me this opportunity to submit my testimony to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Kahn. We now proceed with Mr. Weber, and I want to commend each of you. You've been within 2 seconds of 3 minutes. This is unheard of. Thank you.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and members of the committee, thank you for convening this hearing and the opportunity to testify regarding religious freedom in our military. I'm a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a former Navy pilot, and now director of the Center for Religious Liberty at the Family Research Council, where we have grown increasingly concerned about restrictions on service members' religious expression over the past several years. Despite congressional efforts to address these restrictions and DoD assertions that the problems are modest, religious expression continues to be stifled in our military. As we saw earlier this year when Bibles were removed from Navy lodges due to fears they were causing offense, and when an Air Force Academy cadet's religious expression was singled out and targeted for removal from his own whiteboard. Even if later corrected, such accounts, as others are documented in my written testimony, create a chilling effect and bolster the perception that religious beliefs must be hidden to maintain one's standing in the military. Such censorship reveals a misunderstanding of a very basic truth. Religion simply cannot be sectioned off into neat little compartments in our lives. It is essential to all aspects of the human experience, including how we approach the issues of death and danger so central to military service. How can we ask servicemen and women to do a job which is so incredibly difficult, while at the same time divorcing them from the very spiritual resources they need to do that job? These resources go beyond the confines of the mind and find expression in one's conversations and public affirmations. Consider the example of Jeff Struker, an Army Ranger who was sent into a firefight in the streets of Mogadishu to rescue fallen comrades during the Black Hawk Down incident. In a short film titled Return to Mogadishu, Jeff explains how he relied on God for strength in his ordeal. Are we prepared to tell him that God has no part in his story? I hope not. Why should others be treated any differently? Let me be clear. We do not support coercing anyone into religious practice, but religious freedom, including the ability to speak of one's religion, must be protected. Jeff Struker and many others like them must have the freedom to tell how their life and their faith drive their careers. If we deny them that, we will be suffocating their military service at its very heart. When considering how to approach these issues, we would do well to be informed by the Supreme Court's articulation earlier this year in another case, Town of Greece versus Galloway, which also dealt with role of religion in public life, in which the court said that, quote, offense does not equate to coercion, unquote. But what is to be done? We recommend that this committee ensure that DoD abides by congressional intent in the last 2 defense bills to protect religious expression, including religious speech, ensure that branch regulations reflect these protections, and ensure that military leaders like commanders, chaplains, and JAG officers receive the proper training on these protections. Our servicemen and women do not give up their religious freedom and constitutional rights simply because they join our nation's military. Their rights must be protected too, and we are confident this committee will continue to play an important role in seeing that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. We now proceed to Mr. Weinstein.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Davis, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you profoundly for the gracious invitation to speak with you today. I'm the president and founder of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which is a civil rights organization representing nearly 40,000 military members and veterans, 96% of whom are practicing Christians, who are gravely concerned about their religious freedom. They ask this Congress to protect their right to remain free from those commanders and other superiors who wrongly believe that the First Amendment gives leaders an unrestricted right to proselytize or witness to their subordinates. Whether the subordinate agrees or finds the message unwelcome does not matter. The subordinate must listen respectfully and deferentially or risk being punished under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for showing disrespect to a superior, which is a violation of Articles 89 and 91. Unlike their civilian counterparts, a military subordinate does not have the ability to walk away if they would prefer not to listen. The patriots we represent ask this committee for a simple thing that won't cost the nation 1 red cent: the right to make their own choice regarding religious belief, including the right not to believe in a deity, and to be free from the interference of their leaders when making those religious choices. Freedom of religion is the ultimate liberty of every citizen. It is the highest expression of the freedom to think, to follow one's conscience without interference from the government, and for military members without pressure from a commander or other superior. Military life has no civilian equivalent. So regardless of your thoughts about private sector employers' rights to proselytize or witness to their employees, the Supreme Court has correctly held that the unique military environment requires greater limits on certain freedoms of expression. Writing for an overwhelming 6-2 majority 40 years ago in the 1974 decision of Parker versus Levy, the uber-conservative Chief Justice William Rehnquist said, quote, "This court has long recognized that the military is by necessity a specialized society separate from civilian society. While the members of the military are not excluded from the protection granted by the First Amendment, the different character of the military community and of the military mission requires a different application of those protections. The fundamental necessity for obedience and the consequent necessity for imposition of discipline may render permissible within the military that which would be constitutionally impermissible outside of it. Speech to include religious speech that is protected in the civil population may nonetheless undermine the effectiveness of response to command. If it does, it is constitutionally unprotected." Now, 40 years later, Parker versus Levy remains the absolute and appropriate law of the land. The Air Force captured this Supreme Court's guidance correctly in Air Force Instruction 1-1, amended only a few days ago. It states that Air Force leaders at all levels must ensure their words and actions cannot reasonably be construed to officially endorse or disapprove of or extend preferential treatment for any faith, belief, or absence of belief. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the thing that we have to keep in mind is very, very simple, and that is that we can never be in a situation where to weigh religious beliefs as a necessary sufficient condition for honorable military service is allowable, because it's patently and wrongfully, in every possible way, unconstitutional. We ask the committee's support. Thank you for the chance to speak today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinstein. This is an important hearing. This is important issues that are being discussed. An indication of that, we've been joined by 2 more members of Congress. I'm very grateful that Congressman Doug Lamburn of Colorado, Congressman Trent Franks of Arizona, and I would move unanimous consent that both, in the order of their appearance, be allowed to participate in the hearing. Without any objection, we shall proceed. And again, we could be in recess any moment. And so I just want to thank each one of you. This is going to go down in history as a record of people within the 3-minute limit, much less the 5-minute limit. As we proceed, again, beginning 5 minutes with each of us, and Mr. Giacchetti will keep us in line. Dr. Cruz, both the 2013 and 2014 National Defense Authorization Act require religious belief and expression to be accommodated unless such expression could have an adverse impact on good order and discipline. In your view, what impact has this had on policy on chaplains and service members with diverse religious backgrounds?
First, let me say we're most grateful for this committee's work in the passage of Section 533 and amended by 532 last year. We believe that statutorily the protections exist not only for chaplains but those they serve to be able to serve without fear of recrimination for actions they may take. However, the Department of Defense has been slow in providing implementing guidance on Section 533 and 532, and just recently have issued some guidance that will go to the field. Our concern now is how that guidance is going to be interpreted by those on the field, particularly on the wing level, the brigade level, and their JAGs, and how they will interpret that. case in point is this wing commander and his JAC who made the decision that Colonel Martinez could not write about his faith in Christ. Well, yet another wing commander said, yes, this atheist could write about his atheism. And the last time I checked, this article is still on the Air Force website, whereas this one was removed within an hour of it being posted in the newsletter. So it's how the 533 and 532 is being interpreted in the field. That is the concern, and that's where we ask your help in keeping DOD's feet to the fire, that they obey the intent of Congress.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Berry, in your view, how has the Department of Defense combated the perception that there could be career consequences for speaking out about one's moral or religious convictions?
Chairman Wilson, the Department of Defense is obviously in January of this year with the revision to Instruction 1300.17 has taken great steps forward in trying to ensure that service members' religious liberties are protected. However, as Dr. Cruz alluded to, those are the first steps necessary, and I honestly believe that more needs to be done to, in essence, follow up on simply a Department of Defense instruction and to put meat on the bones, if you will. Namely, what I'm referring to is there needs to be some formal education done both at the command level and for the subject matter experts to deal with these issues. The military has demonstrated great capability at devoting the resources it has available to it to combat issues, social issues and societal issues that it faces, even on controversial topics such as suicide awareness, PTSD, etc. If the military can do the great job that it has in addressing those issues, then certainly it can also do so with the perception or the actual religious hostility that service members are experiencing.
Thank you. And Rabbi Kahn, you and I both began our military careers about the same year. And so thank you for your Navy service. And as a Navy dad, I actually appreciate your service.
Sir, thank you.
You
and I yours.
Well, thank you very much. I was Army, but anyway, this is good. With the National Defense Authorization Act requirements on religious belief, back again to what I mentioned to or ask about Dr. Cruz. In your view, what impact has this policy had on chaplains and service members with diverse religious backgrounds?
Sir, I believe that varies considerably depending on the individual that is involved. For those people who are thoroughly understanding of the idea that we need to have religious freedom, but without using it to coerce others, especially when you are in a position of authority over those individuals. If you have people who are devout in their faith, but who at the same time want to use that in order to protect the rights of choices, faith choices that others make in their command, then it's no problem whatever. It's wonderful. But where you have individuals who believe that they're on a mission to bring others to their point of view, and they want to use every opportunity that they have available in order to pursue that course, then you have cracks in unit cohesion, and you have real problems with maintaining readiness and being prepared for going to war. So I believe it depends greatly on who you're talking about and what that person's approach to those regs happens to be.
Thank you very much. And in strict accordance with the 5 minutes, we now proceed to Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is really following up and perhaps another way of stating the question. And to all of you, have you seen that the recent changes actually clarify or enhanced religious accommodation for service members?
Is that for anybody?
And are they aware? And are they, aware of them as well? I think chaplains certainly are aware of the changes, but I'm just wondering, what do you think? Has it clarified it for them, or has it enhanced their religious accommodation for our service members?
Madam Ranking Member, if I may, I think that there is a tsunami of confusion out there. But there's also a lot of willful confusion. And from the perspective of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, the excuse of, I'm sorry, I just don't understand, seems very specious. The fact that we represent a little over 13.5% of every Muslim American in the U.S. military, 865 LGBT members of the military, mostly Protestants and Roman Catholics, but people of every faith, it gets a little old after a while when a superior says, I'm sorry, I just didn't know. I think they know very well. There's a very purposeful attempt to witness and proselytize, irrespective of Department of Defense directives, instructions, and regulations, and that needs to be combated with people that violate the law being visibly and aggressively disciplined. Thank you.
Ms. Davis, let the record show that Chaplain Cruz agrees with Mikey Weinstein that there is a tsunami of confusion in the field. And one of the problems that we are hearing about is that the 533 instruction has not yet made it down into the JAG Corps schools, or even in some levels of chaplain schools, and that's a concern that the intent of Congress be now implemented and taught to those who are providing subject matter experts to commanders as they have to make really important decisions about religious liberty for the servicemen and women.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi, did you?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know that you can legislate this matter so finely that you can eliminate through the legislation the confusion that exists in the minds of our members of our armed forces. I think what's more important is that if we can find some principles of what we're going to, how we're going to approach religion in the armed forces that are then trained to members of the armed forces from the top down, we would be doing ourselves a big favor. Absolutely, the importance of religious expression in the armed forces, it can't be, in my view, can't be overstated. At the same time, there's a danger that if it's not used appropriately, taking into account the special conditions in the armed forces, it can be damaging. So I must say that most of the time I've seen religious freedom exercised in such a way as to enhance mission accomplishment. But that happens when commanding officers and their senior leadership teams, both officer and enlisted, seek to address the religious needs and sensibilities of all their troops. If we could agree on that we're all going to address the religious needs and sensibilities of all our troops, I think we would take a giant step forward. And I could certainly see that coming to pass within the right environment of conversation and training in the military itself. I'm not sure how you could actually find the language to legislate that effectively.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Berry?
Yes, thank you, Madam Ranking Member. Just from my own experience, having been a student at Naval Justice School and having taught law at the U.S. Naval Academy, just like to offer my own anecdotal experience that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the interplay between the First Amendment and the military at all levels, both in the educational institutions and within the force itself. By way of example, at Naval Justice School, which is a 10-week-long course, roughly 1 to 2 hours was devoted to covering the entire First Amendment, not just the free exercise and establishment clauses, but the entire First Amendment. And that's nowhere near enough to even begin to scrape the surface of the body of law that's out there that needs to be covered. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Weber, did you want to?
Ranking Member Davis, thank you for your question.
Quickly.
I'll just quickly note that the language is pretty clear: sincerely held conscious moral principles of religious beliefs. However, as it's been noted already, that needs to be made clear throughout the services at all levels, and it's supported by a culture of understanding of the intent of what that's trying to get at. So I think the language is clear, but it needs to be made clear throughout the services.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And we are voting on the floor now. We've got 3 votes. The estimate is we'll be back by 3:10. We'll recess and begin immediately with Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina. We're in recess. We had the recess for votes, and at this time, the minority members are in a separate caucus, but we've been advised that we can proceed, and we will with Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And I, in 2005, was notified by an Army chaplain in Iraq who was asked by the company commander to conduct a service for a young Army soldier who had been killed in action. In that particular unit, the Army chaplain needed to email his prayer to the divisional chaplain. Now, let me make it clear that this was taking place outside the chapel in Iraq. And Jonathan Searchbach emailed his divisional chaplain, who emailed back and struck through the words, which was the close of this chaplain, "In the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, amen." He was removed from his chapel. If that's the American military, then I'm sure George Washington would be very disappointed. Because only until the mid-90s did our chaplains have any restriction, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, no restriction at all. I do not know how we in America can think that we should have control over the conscience of a man of faith, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, or Christian. That is not America, military or non-military. We in the House Armed Services Committee this past year got into the NDAA bill. I'm going to read this, and I want to ask each one of you to give me a short sentence. The religious freedom of military chaplains to close a prayer outside of a religious service according to the dictates of the chaplain's conscience. Conscience. I don't think any government should dictate the conscience of any human being, be a minister or a chaplain. That's not what God intended. And for us to say that because I am Jewish, that I have to close a prayer in a certain way, or because I'm a Christian or an imam, it doesn't matter. It's America. And these kids are given their life in Muslim countries so that the Muslim imams can have freedom to pray as they see fit. But yet in America, where they came from to give their life, our chaplains are being challenged to how to close a prayer. It's a sad day for America when that's happening. It's a sad day for the military. I talked to one of the chaplains for General Schwarzkopf. Desert Storm, he said, I had no restriction. The general would say we need to have prayer before battle. We need to have prayer after battle. He never said to me, you be conscious of how you close your prayer. If we're starting to dictate the conscience of our ministers and our chaplains, then America, God forgive us because we're not protecting freedom in America. That's a sad day. How can anyone, and I want you quick answer because of the time, I got 1 minute and 32 seconds. I want each one of you to say this is fair or this is not fair. Just give me that, fair or not fair. The religious freedom of military chaplains to close a prayer outside of a religious service, according to the dictates of the chaplain's conscience, is that fair or unfair? And I'll start with you, Mr. Barry. Just give me yes or no.
Yes, sir.
I think that is a fair statement. Yes, sir.
No, sir, it's not fair at all.
Okay, then you believe that as anyone, you have a right to believe that the government should dictate how your conscience functions. Then it's a sad day, and I would fight for Jewish rabbi chaplains' right to close the prayer they see fit. And if we're going to start challenging people of different faiths and religion, we're headed toward the end of the world. Yes, sir. Please, next.
It is fair, Congressman.
Congressman Jones, it's a beautiful day for America when we have a situation, excuse me, I want to answer your question. No, I want to answer your question. It's an unfair question you're asking. I don't even understand your question. What I'm saying is in the military, Congressman, you can have either religious formations or mandatory formations. You can't have mandatory religious formations. You cannot have mandatory religious formations.
And at this time, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. We'll be proceeding to Congressman Dr. Joe Heck of Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today for the hearing. You know, obviously a very emotionally charged topic, and rightfully so, I believe. I've served for over 24 years through various levels of command, and have had a chaplain as a personal staff officer assigned to me through all levels of command. As many of you probably know, Army FM 6-0, the chaplain is personal staff assigned to the commander to provide for the free expression of religion and the religious, moral, and ethical leadership. He has a dual role, or she has a dual role, as a religious leader and as a staff advisor. My concern is that we seem to be getting so wrapped around the axle that we're actually going to infringe upon the ability of a chaplain to do the job that they are charged to do, which is not just be a religious leader and minister to the needs of the service members, but to be that staff advisor on religious issues, moral and ethical issues to the commander. I relied heavily on my chaplains during difficult times. I was in Al-Assad for a year, taking care of dying soldiers every day in a cache. And to go up to the chaplain and ask to pray for me or to pray with me, regardless of the denomination of that chaplain, was one of the things that helped me get through that deployment as we cared for our servicemen and women. And I say, Mr. Weinstein, I take exception with the comment you made that you believe commanders are willfully proselytizing because of this specious argument of I just didn't know. I think the problem is that we've got to define what coercion is. We use that word, but if I speak to my formation in an informal setting and I want to end that with saying, may God bless you, am I violating, in your opinions, am I violating their civil liberties? Am I coercing them to follow a specific religious dictum because that's how I choose to end a talk with my troops? And those are the issues that trouble me, is that we are truly going to make it so difficult for chaplains. I mean, Rabbi, you said that in your statement when you were referring to ministering to those dying of wounds, you used the phrase, quote, God forbid, end quote. If I use that phrase, God forbid, in a statement or in a talk before my formation, am I proselytizing because I've invoked a deity higher than mine that perhaps some other religious background does not believe in? So not only do I believe we're making this more difficult for our chaplains, we're making it more difficult for our commanders. Right. And that's why there's so much confusion. We're getting so afraid of what we can and can't say to be politically correct as opposed to speaking from the heart to the men and women that we are leading in the battle. How can I expect men and women to follow me and put their lives on the line if I've got to spend more time worrying about how I'm going to phrase something than getting the job done? So again, I only got a minute 45 left. So, I mean, in your opinions, and I'll go down the line, is saying things, I mean, but I'm looking for input. I mean, I know what my staff chaplain tells me now. I'd like to get some outside expertise. Closing a talk with the formation, again, not in formation, we're gathered around, even if it's a mandatory meeting. And at the end of it, I say, you know, God bless you. Am I proselytizing? Am I violating their rights? Mr. Berry?
Dr. Heck, not only is that position consistent with, it's actually supported by our federal courts. There's case law on that actually says, and I'll just give one brief quote, military chaplains do not invoke the official imprimatur of the military when they give a sermon or are acting in a religious capacity, and therefore it is wholly appropriate for them to advance their religious beliefs in that context.
But not as a chaplain. I'm saying as a commander, not as a man of the cloth, but as a commander using that phrase.
Yes.
So that's part of the thing that Mr. Weinstein brought up, that commanders are willfully proselytizing.
Yep.
That's consistent as well. So.
Sir, Dr. Heck, thank you for your service. Just because you're a commander does not mean that you give up your religious liberties. I believe your religious liberties remain, just as every other service members, that you are able to exercise your religious liberties.
Rabbi?
God bless you. I really would like to explain my answer to both of you.
In 15 seconds.
But I can't do it in 15 seconds.
so let's get together
I very much want to respond.
Let's get together afterwards, or perhaps you can respond for the record, if we could, or have a discussion offline. Mr. Weber?
Congressman or Dr. Eck, I definitely agree with the sentiment expressed that the oversensitivity to making a comment, a religious reference, and the reaction to that is a severe problem. I think that's what we're here to address today, and it's not coercion every time a deity is mentioned or a religious reference is made.
And my time is up, but Mr. Chairman, I have your indulgence just to get Mr. Weinstein.
Yes.
Okay.
Congressman Jones, actually it's pronounced Weinstein.
Sorry.
God bless you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, look, the bottom line here is that we're talking about a unity. Why would there's a large number, some people say as many as a quarter of our military that shares no faith whatsoever. Obviously, if somebody sneezes and you say God bless you say God bless you, and it's not a Tourette syndrome thing. But to say it from a purposeful perspective right before you go into a combat mission, the question I have for you, sir, and I thank you for your service, why would you want to say something that could possibly be divisive and not unifying for your men and women as you go into combat?
Well, and perhaps we can have that conversation offline as well. I don't want to impose on the chairman any more than I already have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Heck. We now proceed to Congressman Dr. John Fleming of Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel, for being here. We had a hearing just like this several months ago in where we had chaplains from the military, the highest-ranking chaplains, and that hearing and previous hearings, whenever we posed a question, particularly from this clear and present danger, that really catalogs the many instances. Basically, their response was there's never been a problem, those things didn't happen, or they were misinterpreted, and so forth. So I challenged them. I said, you take this back and give us a report on it, and we have it in the notes, and I'd like to submit it for the record. But for many cases, they conceded that there was a problem. It just hadn't been properly addressed. In other cases, they just didn't address it at all. But you know what was interesting is right after the meeting, I'm walking down the hallway, and a military officer who was in that meeting came up to me and said, sir, you need to realize this is a huge problem in the military. What these gentlemen are telling you is not really reflective of the reality that's going on in the military. And so that certainly spoke to my heart on this. Now, I hear the word proselytizing banning back. We've discussed this many times. I've yet to hear one member of Congress say that we should have a law that allows or promotes in any way proselytizing. No one has an interest in that. That becomes simply a straw man argument, something to argue against that really doesn't exist in fact. So I think that we need to be sure that we're talking about the right thing here. The important thing that happened in 533 that we changed in fiscal year 14 from the NDAA was the prior language said that military members were allowed to believe what they wanted to believe. Well, that's not what the First Amendment says. The First Amendment talks about speech. It talks about expression. Government can't keep you from believing anything anyway. You can always believe what you want to believe. The crux of the matter, where the rubber meets the road, if you will, is always in expression, religious expression. And, you know, it's interesting. The courts have given a wide swath on the First Amendment. For instance, we see things on TV and in movies now that were unthinkable a few years ago. Why? Because the courts say it's your First Amendment right. It doesn't matter if it offends someone. And yet we hear in the military where someone has a Bible on their desk or they write something on a whiteboard, and all of a sudden it offends people and it has to be taken down. So there's clearly a double standard being applied. But for Dr. Cruz, I'd like to ask you this. Does the Chaplain Alliance continue to receive complaints from chaplains restricting their religious expressions?
We have received complaints, Dr. Fleming, of a chaplain that Congressman Jones made reference to, but more recently a chaplain who was told to preach two sermons, one on Sunday morning and one on Sunday night, the same message in two different services, and he preached that message on a Sunday morning, and then immediately following that service he was visited by his supervisory chaplain and told he could not preach that same message in a chapel service that night.
Could I interrupt you just
Yes.
for a second? It states very clearly under 533, it says no member of the armed services may, number one, require a chaplain to perform any rite, ritual, or ceremony that is contrary to the conscience, moral principles, or religious beliefs of the chaplain.
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't that be to require a chaplain to do that? Would that be a violation?
It would be a violation, yes, sir. And this chaplain was instructed not to preach that message because of the content of that particular text that he was reading from and how he was interpreting that text. But my understanding is the role of the chaplain, that we represent the faith groups who sent us there. And this chaplain was being totally in accord with the faith group that had sent him to be a chaplain. And we believe that that supervisory chaplain was totally out of line in trying to monitor or change that chaplain's sermon material. That to me, that was a gross violation of what Congress intended in Section 533. And there are other examples as well.
Sure. Mr. Berry, if we impinge the rights of those who express themselves of conscience and religious beliefs, does that not also endanger those who may have atheistic, agnostic, or humanistic perspectives?
That's absolutely correct, Dr. Fleming. In fact, religious freedom should be of concern to all Americans, regardless of what faith they hold or no faith at all. And in fact, even one instance of religious hostility will have and does have a chilling effect across the entire military, from the senior most general to the lowliest private. Just one incident is all it takes. And that message is sent very clearly that if you do something that's considered to be out of line or politically incorrect, you will be punished. And in fact, there are actual Air Force JAG memorandums expressing that opinion, as we alluded to earlier, that although beliefs are protected in the Air Force, actions and speech stemming from those beliefs are still punishable. Well, that sends a very clear message. If you have a religious belief or no belief at all, you have to keep it within your own, within yourself. You cannot express it or speak on it.
Right. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. We now proceed to Chairman Randy Forbes of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm sorry I only have 5 minutes. I've got to make my questions short and ask your answers to be even shorter. Mr. Weinstein, in a Washington Post article on July 16, 2006, they attributed a quote to you that said, "We've created this foundation to be a weapon. We're going to lay down a withering field of fire and leave sucking chest wounds." Was that an accurate quote? Weinstein, I apologize. I just need to know whether you made.
What I was saying was, I said it earlier. It's Weinstein, and maybe you weren't listening.
No,
so.
What I want to know about you is your.
Yeah, I want to make it very clear that we realize that what we're facing is a tsunami of fundamentalist
Did you
Christian.
make that quote or not? And I know you.
I'm going to get your. I'm going to. Can I answer your question?
No, sir, because I don't have but 4 minutes.
Yeah, I'll
yes
answer in 5 seconds. I'm trying to explain what I said. We are facing a tsunami of fundamentalist Christian exceptionalism and supremacy.
Let me ask you another one, then, if you're not going to answer.
No, I'm happy to tell you. Yes, of course I said those words, and proudly.
The second one, on June 16, 2013, you said, "Today we face incredibly well-funded gangs of fundamentalist Christian monsters who terrorize their fellow Americans by forcing their weaponized and twisted version of Christianity upon their helpless subordinates in our nation's armed forces." Did you make that quote?
I did.
Okay, then here's what I want to just say to you guys. That, to me, is the definition of coercion. That, and Rabbi, when you give your statement earlier, and I don't think you meant this, but if I came to you with a marriage problem or a financial problem or thoughts of suicide, I'm looking for authenticity, you know, and I almost got from you the fact that you felt that if you weren't telling me what I wanted to hear, that somehow or the other that you were coercing me. And I just don't think that's the definition that we want to put on our men and women in uniform. And so, Mr. Weber, I want to ask you, based on...
That was not what I meant, sir.
Based on Town of Greece versus Galloway, can you explain what the difference is between coercion by that court decision and being offended?
I can, Congressman. You know, in that case, the court said that, quote, "offense does not equate to coercion." That was Justice Kennedy in a concurring opinion. Now, in that case, the court was dealing with prayer in a public setting, at a local government gathering. But what it had to confront was whether the offense towards people who disagreed with the prayer of a certain speaker who was coming and praying according to the dictates of a certain religion was sufficient to justify an Establishment Clause claim. And actually, if you look at the dissent, the majority and concurring opinions, the Supreme Court unanimously agreed that religion had a role in public life. So none of the justices said religion can't be here, has no place here. They just disagreed they differed over what lengths the government had to go to accommodate minority beliefs. But they roundly repudiated the notion that offense equated with coercion. And that this is a recent decision, the Supreme Court's ruling on an Establishment Clause case. And this isn't the only case. I use that as an example because I think it's pretty clear what they mean by coercion and offense.
Mr. Berry, how about you? I mean, I just can't comprehend. Our guys in the military are pretty tough. They get a lot of this stuff thrown at them. I can't comprehend how a cadet writing a scripture verse on a whiteboard is defined as coercion versus, just even offending somebody. How do you look at Town of Greece versus Galloway and the difference between offense and between coercion?
I agree with Mr. Weber's assessment, and to go back to the Air Force Academy whiteboard incident, I actually had the opportunity to meet with the senior attorney at the Air Force Academy to ask why they held the position that the verse would have to be removed. And the position that they took was that because that cadet held a position of leadership, and under Air Force Instruction 1-1, as a leader within his cadet squadron, it may cause other cadets who were subordinate to that cadet to feel that they had to share his belief in order to curry favor or gain favorable treatment, or somehow it was a barrier to access to that cadet.
And see, and I've only got 30 seconds, but that's exactly what Dr. Fleming is saying. That's what I haven't heard any people of faith calling atheists monsters or saying they want to put sucking wounds in them. I mean, you're basically looking at a situation here where these individuals are stating what they believe, and based on that, we're calling that coercion, and then we're starting to restrict that kind of freedom of expression and belief. Nobody is defending individuals trying to proselytize or coerce. We're simply trying to say we need a protection. Just because you wear a uniform doesn't mean that you no longer have your right to express your freedom of your faith. And, Mr. Chairman, my time is out, so I yield back.
And thank you, Chairman Forbes. We now proceed to Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler of Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here on this very, very important topic. Chaplain Cruz, I'd like to visit with you first. Do you feel like that the chaplains represented by the Chaplain Alliance fully confident in their ability to teach, express, and counsel based on the tenets of their faith without repercussions from the chain of command?
That is our sincere hope, that has been long-standing policy for chaplains, that chaplains, as I mentioned earlier, represent the faith that sent them to be chaplains. We fully expect a rabbi to be a rabbi, and a Baptist to be a Baptist, a Catholic to be a priest. Where we have experienced difficulty is in a few areas now of some supervisory chaplains wanting to step in to monitor sermons, monitor prayers, monitor teachings, which has caused us to come to you to ask for the Section 533, for which we are grateful. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Since we have passed the Section 533, have you seen a change in how that has been supervised, how chaplains have been supervised?
Unfortunately, I have to say not yet. Now, we know that the Department of Defense just earlier this year finally issued some implementing guidance for which we are grateful. But we are still waiting to see how that implementing guidance is going to be carried out and how it's going to be taught both at JAG schools and chaplain schools today.
So, as you know, DOD policy rightly calls on chaplains to serve individuals of all faiths and no faith, and yet they're also held accountable to their faith traditions from their various denominations that support them. So as a chaplain, how do you balance these two aspects of your job? Must you be non-sectarian in all the duties that you perform?
I tell the chaplains that I endorse, you serve everyone who walks through your door or you meet in the motor pool with grace and dignity. You are there to support them. And you're there to either perform the duties that you can perform according to your faith conscience, or if you cannot, then you're to provide for them. You're to find someone who can do that. And by and large, chaplains have been doing that successfully since 1775 of providing and performing those religious ministries. And so, yes, our chaplains today are great men and women of the cloth who are serving all who come to them without any discrimination as to who they are, with the understanding that I tell our chaplains, you have to be clear. If someone is coming to you for counsel, you have to be clear up front. I'm going to counsel you from a biblical perspective. If that's a problem, then let me find another chaplain that you may be more comfortable with. That's been working well, and we trust that it's going to continue to work well.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so as well. Mr. Weber, wanted to follow up on something you said earlier. In light of the recent Supreme Court precedent, if I'm offended at something someone else has said or about their faith, does that mean that was a violation of the Establishment Clause?
Congresswoman, it does not mean there is a violation of the Establishment Clause. Now, as I mentioned, that case dealt with a specific context, but the court was very clear in dealing with the context in that case. It noted that American citizens can deal with offense. As part of a free democracy, we engage in robust debate and to come into conflict with opinions with which we disagree all the time. Therefore, you're going to have to live with being offended. Now, it was a local government context, but I think we can trust servicemen and women who are facing battle conditions and the dangers of war and all sorts of other offending circumstances that a viewpoint with which they disagree is not going to be a problem.
Good. We certainly hope not. We want to protect our religious freedoms. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Horslow. We now proceed to Congressman Doug Lamborn of Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for having this hearing. And I first want to say God bless each one of you for your service. I have the honor of representing the Air Force Academy, and after the whiteboard incident, I went over there to see what the whiteboards look like. And they're actually real small. They're about the size of this piece of paper right outside the dormitory doors that each person has. Mr. Berry, was anything wrong with a cadet, whatever his role or position, writing an inspirational Bible verse on his whiteboard?
No. In fact, Mr. Lamborn, that was really the issue that I raised with the attorney there, was that they had stopped reading Air Force Instruction 1-1, at least the version that existed at the time. It's been since revised. But they stopped reading it at paragraph 211, which says that the requirement of government neutrality toward religion. And I said, what about the very next paragraph, which says that airmen are able to freely practice their own beliefs? And what about the protections that exist in DoD Instruction 1300.17? And the response, unfortunately, I received was, well, this is not my policy. This is Air Force policy coming from the Pentagon. So it was a very unsatisfactory answer. But you're absolutely right, Mr. Lamborn, that cadet had every right under our Constitution to express his religious belief or no belief at all.
And we've talked a little bit about leadership. And my concern is that if taken to an extreme, someone who is a leader and has a religious component to his or her life of a multitude of religions, and to not be able to ever discuss that would be dishonest with other people. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. And in fact, that reminds me of the very last thing that my commanding officer said to our unit in Afghanistan before we departed friendly confines, and that was that we were to go, that we had been physically prepared to fight the enemy, but that it was up to each of us to make sure that we were mentally and spiritually prepared to fight, that we were to fight with a clean heart and a clean conscience.
Dr. Cruz, I offered an amendment to the NDAA this last summer, which was accepted by the whole House, and it required the Air Force to rewrite its religious liberty regulations. What is your opinion on the new Air Force regulation language?
We are very grateful for the new language. We believe that it brings that Air Force policy more closely in line with the intent of your committee with 533. I'm not an attorney and don't play one on TV, but my reading of it, I understand it to be more in line with federal law, RFRA. It uses some of the RFRA language that I think will help commanders and JAGs to be better able to make decisions like the White Fort incident, like this dear Colonel's article, that there's no reason why people of faith, regardless of their rank, cannot be able to express that faith while they're wearing the uniform.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Weber, you gave us a quote in your testimony to the effect that being offended doesn't mean being coerced. If someone like Mr. Weinstein is offended by an evangelical Christian, whether it's a chaplain or an airman or an officer, talking about his faith, does that translate into being coerced?
Congressman, it does not. As I mentioned, and this comes from the Supreme Court this year, offense itself does not mean there's coercion. And, I think that's a policy and a principle that could be easily applied and to uphold the rights of all to live out their lives in accordance with their conscience and beliefs.
Well, I'm going to yield back, but once again, I thank all 5 of you for your service. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lamborn, and we now will be concluding with Congressman Tim Hulskamp of Kansas.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to participate in this hearing. I would like to thank the members of the committee that have done a superb job on protecting religious liberty, and this issue means a lot to me personally, Mr. Chairman. In our family, we just buried my uncle who had served 30 years as a U.S. Army chaplain at age 97 and served many tours of duty. And so this means a lot to me. And I'd like to first ask Dr. Cruz a question. And as you know, DOD policy calls on chaplains to serve individuals of all faiths and no faith, and yet they're also held accountable to the faith traditions that support their endorsements. As a chaplain, how do you balance these two aspects of the job?
It's a good question, and as I said, chaplains wear 2 hats. We are chaplains, we are ministers, our rabbis, are people of the cloth, as we say, that represent the faith group from which we come. We're also staff officers at whatever level that we are serving. And we are to be that advisor to the commander on morale and the welfare of the military persons that we are serving. Historically, chaplains have done a great job, I think, of balancing that fine line of being true to their convictions, being true to their conscience, and yet serving a broad multitude of faiths or no faiths. I know in my last assignment at Fort Campbell, we had a group of pagans, and they wanted to have a space to do what they do. And it was part of my job as the chaplain to provide that space and also to provide any funds that they may need to carry out so that they could practice their faith or non-faith. And I think chaplains, by and large, have done an excellent job of that. And we want to make sure that chaplains are continue to be encouraged that they can be representatives of their faith group without fear of recrimination, particularly in this politicized society and culture we live in right now.
Yeah, Dr. Cruz, and I do hear from chaplains, not only in my district but elsewhere in the country, that are worried. They fear for their rights of conscience, their ability to serve men and women who are putting their lives on the line. And do you think the DOD is adequately protecting their conscience as well as the members are that they try to serve?
These are challenging days. It's a different day. Rabbi Kahn and I were talking before the hearing how that it's a different day now than when we were serving on active duty. And it's particularly because of the cultural climate change that's taken place in our country and in our military. And it's making it difficult for some who particularly come from an Orthodox, and that's with a little O, faith background, understanding of biblical values and morals, that they may not be in the politically accepted camp right now. And so for them to be able to continue to serve and be seen as a team player, to be able to do the marriage retreats that they want to do, but yet they cannot because they are told that they would have to violate their conscience in order to do those marriage retreats. That's a growing concern, and how that is solved I don't think we have found the answers yet in any of the branches, but we are hopeful that the chiefs of chaplains understand and believe that they do and want to support. We believe that they want to support the chaplains that they are supervising, to be able to be faithful to their faith group and yet to be able to serve all of the service members of their units and commands.
Yeah, I appreciate particularly work on the committee and in certain traditions, particularly a Roman Catholic tradition. The ability to find enough priests to serve our Catholic men and women is extremely limited. And there are things we can do as Congress to make that easier. And certainly protecting their conscience is definitely one of those that rates very highly. And Mr. Wepper, if we might finalize, if you could talk a little bit about just quickly a dynamic that makes it important for the armed forces to protect the religious expression of our chaplains.
Absolutely, Congressman. I think, as Dr. Cruz has already pointed out, what we're interested in seeing is chaplains' ability to act and live out their conscience and faith according to their deeply held beliefs in their role as a chaplain, just as the rest of us may seek to live out certain beliefs in our lives or work or as we go about our daily business. So to that extent, we're pleased that the language protecting chaplains is in place. The way that's worked out in practice and how it looks going forward in terms of how it's practiced at all levels of the military is going to be continually important. But like the protection of religious expression for servicemen and women, we obviously care about it being in place for chaplains too. And I can concur with everything that Dr. Cruz has said here.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Huelskamp, and I recognize Congressman Dr. John Fleming for a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I asked unanimous consent. The question was brought up about surveys showing that 25% of the military, and when it came to religious diversity, were, I'm not sure if I recall correctly the word used, atheist or non-believers or something like that. And I refer back to, and I'd like to submit for the record, from the Military Leadership Diversity Commission, a religious diversity in the U.S. military study that was done, pretty large study. And what it actually showed is 4% humanist, which is the closest it came to atheist. 12.1% were no religious affiliation reported. That is to say, they didn't necessarily affiliate with one denomination or another, which is a trend in the evangelical world. I'm a Baptist, and many people now say that they're evangelical or they're not attached to any specific denomination. So that's really a misrepresentation of what the real percentages are in that, and I wanted to be sure and submit this study. It's a pretty good study from 2009.
Are there any objection? Without objection, so ordered. I'd like to thank Ms. Davis again for her role as the ranking member of the committee. We appreciate each of the witnesses being here today. I particularly want to thank the Military Personnel Subcommittee professional staff led by Jeanette James, David Giacchetti, Colin Bossi, additionally Craig Green, and we've been very fortunate to pick up recently assigned Denisha Bates. If there's no further, we shall be adjourned.